This is cool. So the rules are there are no rules. Have fun and be yourself. Introduce yourself. So my name is Vinnie, born and raised in Pittsburgh, a husband, father, 2 kids, one on the way. And I love talking to people, understanding where they're at in life, and then, the work that I do all comes from the relationships that I've formed throughout the years. Like I never market myself as the best at this or the best at that, or I just want to be the most present person in the room and then just see where that goes. So me as a person, what I want people to know about me is that, it's somebody who cares about others. I do the right thing when a lot of people wouldn't, or at least I've seen a lot of people not do the right thing in those scenarios. Not perfect, but I try to check myself when I notice that I'm not living up to a standard that I know that I'm capable of. So, and a lot of that comes from painting, like we talked about before the camera was rolling. Those 40 hours when you're working on a piece, there's a lot of self-reflecting that I'm doing, and revisiting previous conversations. Sometimes that's toxic, and sometimes it's really healing, where I can revisit something I may have said and look at it from a different perspective and be like, I can see how they took it that way. But then the hard part is actually acting on that. So I'm a very deep, as far as like, I want my relationships deep. I want my connections that I make in this world to not just be transactional. And so that's me. So VC2 is my company that I started in 2021. It stands for Vincent Candelore Jr, which is my name. My dad was VC1. He was a guitar player, and he was a huge influence on my life. Even in sports and art, like he encouraged me to be an artist at a young age because he was one himself. He was a carpenter, blue collar guy. I watched him get up at 3 a.m. every day. He worked for Macero Corporation, which is in Pittsburgh here. He was started out as a base level carpenter and rose up into a superintendent on the job site. And I watched him bust his ass just for our whole family and for everything that we had. My mom was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and then she ended up having to take a job at the local cemetery. And so I was raised in a cemetery. Like all my summer vacations, I would go to work with my mom because there was like an office in the house at the top of the hill. It was Round Hill Cemetery. So there's just like, you go up this massive hill in Elizabeth, and there's a house at the top with an office in it. And I would just sit in there all day long during the summer or ride my bike around the cemetery. And I had, the guys that would dig the graves, they would take the extra dirt and they would make like BMX courses for me and my friends and stuff. So it's like a weird, when I look back on it, I'm like, yeah, I really was playing hide and seek in like cemeteries, like every single day growing up. But it was also like this first introduction to my relationship with death and understanding, all these families are coming in and mourning the loss of their loved ones, picking out a grave site or whatever, and I'm in the other room like drawing Mickey Mouse, like with headphones in, just living my life. So I feel like maybe that is where the artistic side of me, it was how I kind of processed some of those deep emotions at a young age. And then my dad being a musical inspiration to me and just an artistic person in general, he passed away at 49 and I was 24. It was a year before I got married. And that was really difficult for me because he understood me more than anybody I had really ever met. Obviously it's my father, but I was blessed enough to have a very supportive and engaged father in my life. And so when I lost him, I was I was lost, I didn't know who I was going to be. I thought eventually I'd do some sort of marketing or whatever within his construction company and we'd do something together. So I feel like I kind of hit reset on my life at 24 when I got married and moved to Charlotte. And that was where I formed VC2. And it was in honor of my dad. And it was me deciding that, I could have just started working and, I had a lot of job opportunities and offers that I just turned down because I wanted to pursue this and see where it would take me. And, I watched my dad pass away at 49 thinking that he'd have later in his life to get back to the music and, get out and start playing again and write his own stuff. And he never had that opportunity. So, every day that I wake up and put on something that's VC2, like I remember him in a way. And now my son is VC3. So like I'm trying to form something that he can step into someday and be proud of. On a scale from 1 to 10, how authentically are you living your life, both on and offline? Well, I would say that it's a tough question to answer because I'd say authentic, I'm living 7 or 8 because it's all authentic. I mean, obviously, like, you have edited videos. You're cutting out the stuff, like, you know, that you don't want people to see. But, you know, I would say I can be way more authentic, as in sharing who I am behind VC2, the husband, the father. I'm starting to do that more. And I took a long time off of line, or off of social media, because I was trying to figure out who I was in that time where I was in Charlotte. And then when I moved back to Pittsburgh due to the pandemic, actually, we were down in Charlotte when that happened, and my wife and I had an 8-month-old at the time. It was really difficult with lockdowns. We were going through a lot down there, and she decided she wanted to come back to Pittsburgh. And she's like, I just need to be around family, get some help, you know, through postpartum and all that stuff. And so I had to, like, make a decision. You know, I had already started building some momentum in Charlotte with my career, and you know, she wanted to be in Pittsburgh, and it was like this fork in the road for us where, you know, I chose my family, and I laid everything down that I was building in Charlotte to be with my family. And so moved back here during the pandemic. We lived with my mother and father-in-law for 2 months in their bedroom with a newborn, because we're paying rent in Charlotte. We don't know if this pandemic's going to go on and we're going to go back to Charlotte, or what that looked like. So you know, it was like a really transitional phase. I had launched VC2 like a few years prior to that, but it wasn't an official like LLC or company. It was just an Instagram. And so my art got me through the pandemic. You know, we moved into a house together, and it was actually her father's house. He was left from his dad that passed away before COVID. So we ended up buying that house off of him. And the first room that I renovated in the house was the basement. I painted it black so that I could just use it as an art studio. And I dug us out of this hole we were in using art. And then, like I said, I've just used those relationships and built on those to get to the point where VC2 is not just custom shoes and paintings anymore, but it's helping people tell their story the way that I have honestly done a bad job at telling my story. I would say, scale 1 to 10, I'm going to give you a 7. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, though. But this is going to make me, I'll probably think about this in my next painting for like 40 hours, so appreciate that. I think I also just answered this question.
You did, so you can skip it if you want
What
to.
is the origin story of VC2 art? I mean, I could tell you the moment that I formed it. I had an Instagram called Candelore Customs, where you could still search on Instagram at Candelore Customs. And that was my first Instagram attempt at separating my personal page and brand from the artwork I was making. And so I was just doing custom shoes on there, maybe some paintings here and there. And then I started to get into some events, and this was all in Charlotte. But I had another Instagram called Uni Edits. Uni Edits was like a graphic design page where I would just post like Steeler mock-ups or like, you know, concept uniforms and designs. And it was all graphic based, but it was like blowing up at the time. And then I wasn't interested in that anymore, so I just left this page with 20,000 followers just sitting there, like, I don't know what to do with this, for like a year, 2 years. And then I came back and was like, okay, I'm posting on my personal brand, I'm posting on this Candelore Customs. I have this dead page that's got 20,000 followers, like, what am I doing? So I just kind of merged them all together and changed Uni Edits to VC2 Art, and that was the origin of how that started moving. Like, a lot of my early success was through like graphic design, actually, not even through custom shoes or paintings. I don't think a lot of people knew that, so I'm glad you threw that in there. This is fun, by the way. What drives you to create, and what is your mission? I would say what drives me to create is my desire to enjoy the work that I do. It's the fastest track to get to the life I want and enjoy what I do. And if I'm not creating, if I'm just checking boxes or doing a job, like, I can do it if the why is big enough, but usually the why is just not sufficient enough, because that why, like, there's a lot of sacrifices that come with that why. You know, time with my kids, time with my wife, even time expressing myself. Like, I like to paint and not do it for money. Like, that's why I started painting to begin with. Like, when my dad passed away, I painted a picture that was how I felt about that in like the night he passed away. So, like, people don't understand, art was always my way of getting outside of it. It was never attached to money at first. Now that it's attached to money, sometimes I almost want to say no to more commission pieces, because like they fill all my painting time. And now when I get out of a 40-hour painting, I don't know what to do with myself, because I'm like, I have all these things I need to process through. Well, I'm not going to go paint again. Like, I need to get out. That's where I've started to find other avenues, and I think that's where a lot of artists kind of go wrong, is because, not go wrong, but like go in a bad direction, because when your art becomes your source of income, and that art was always the way you processed your deepest, darkest feelings and emotions, where do you run? Well, a lot of people run to toxic things, relationships, money, pursuit of whatever. And that's the hardest thing, I think, for creatives, is when that success comes, what is your new outlet? What is your new, and for me right now it's VC2. Like I want to build a team of people that can serve clients at a high level, because that gives me purpose. Like I see these people that are checking boxes every day come into a meeting where me and my team throw out an idea and they go, oh my God, we never thought of it like that. That reinvigorates that purpose in their role or in their job, and they're excited, and they say, like, we love when you guys come in here and talk about this, because this is why we started here in the first place, was to have projects like this. And what drives me to create is my passion for a life well lived, and like taking advantage of the days that I have here. And my mission is to create a platform of that kind of work that provides space for as many of me as I can find out there. Truly, like, when you finally get into the rooms that you never thought you'd be in. As an artist, I feel like it's your responsibility to get as many creatives into that room as you possibly can, and see what can really happen. There's a lot of people, and like they never get that opportunity. And I saw that. I keep coming back to my father, but like I saw that. Like, he was one of the most technically sound guitar players I had ever met. So you see these. You realize it's not about how accurately I can do a painting. It's not about the skill. I mean, it is, because that's where it's got to be about that for you, and then that's the mission, is how big can I build something that allows other people to figure out what drives them to create. You're doing your research. This is awesome. This year you're reintroducing yourself beyond VC2 art. What parts of yourself are you hoping to share more of? People think of me as a chaotic artist. They put me in a category when I say I'm an artist, immediately. I've always led with, hi, I'm Vinnie, I'm an artist. Hi, I'm Vinnie, I'm a painter. I'm Vinnie. I just recently started switching that. I'm Vinnie. Nice to meet you. And I always felt like I had to attach some sort of like thing that I did to validate me being in that conversation with that person, rather than just like, I'm Vinnie. Nice to meet you. A lot of people now are, they get 5-6 conversations in with me, and then they're like, wait, you paint? I used to lead with that, and it just immediately would put me in a box. And like, that's what I'm excited right now for, is the parts of myself are that at 7:30 every night I shut off everything and try to spend some time with my kids if I've had a long day of meetings or working in the studio or whatever. And like those moments are like what I live for. Like, I got to take my son the other day to Dick's. My cousin Tyler Basic plays basketball at Elizabeth Forward right now. We've been watching a couple of his games, and I took my son the other day, and it was like really cool because it was the first time he got to see it in person. He loves watching basketball on TV, but seeing it in person, watching his cousin play, it was like switch went off. And so he's been like, I want a big boy basketball. I want a big boy basketball. He kept saying it. And so my wife threw this little Galentine's event for my daughter and her friends, and I took him to Dick's Sporting Goods and took him out there. First of all, basketballs are $125. This is crazy. Yeah. And his cousin has, like, he showed me the one. I was like, let's look online. We went first. It was like a great night. We went to Permani's, got pizza. Then we went to Dick's at South Hills, and at Permani's, I'm like going through Dick's website, and I'm like, all right, look at this one, look at this one. He's 3, and he stops me and goes, this is the one Hendrix has, which is his older cousin. And I look at it, it's like $130. And so I'm like, well, what about these ones, dude? Like, check out these. Like, you're going to trash this basketball. I know this. So I'm like scrolling him down. Of course, we get to Dick's. He runs straight. Like, he knew exactly what basketball he wanted. So, but then, yeah, so long story short, like, I'm excited to talk about that. Like, there's a whole human side of me that I struggle. Like, being a creative is not easy. Financially, spiritually, mentally, like physically, you're hunched over. Like, I struggle a lot. And it has not been sunshine and rainbows to get this thing moving. And I want to share those struggles too, because I think a lot of people think that, you know, it's all cool because, you know, people think because you work with certain people that your life is, your problems are all solved. It doesn't, money doesn't solve that. It does help, but it doesn't solve it. It's just a tool, just like anything else. And if you have that one tool, but you don't have this tool, you can't build a house. And so it's all about balance and finding that well-rounded self that I don't think I've done a great job sharing. I think I share a lot of the highlights. So to go back to your question earlier, I think that's why I'm at like a 7 is I really am only sharing the highlights because VC2 is a business. You know, businesses don't really share the struggles. They share the highlights. Now, me, on the other hand, I'm on the struggle bus every day. So, like, I want to start sharing that and talking about that on my personal brand. And that's what I'm excited about. Do you have any fears around letting people see who you are? Yeah, all right. Yeah, how do you do this? Yeah, I'm terrified. Because I think you have, like, you ever see those magicians that have, like, a magic printer that, like, when they're talking, they, like, have... Like,
I'm, like, writing
as
as
this
you're
printing
reading.
in here? Like, for the record, this was on the chair when I came in. So this is... You're good at what you do.
Thank you.
Do you have any fears around letting people see who you are beyond your art? Yes, but I have more fears about not doing that. I think that will slowly eat away at me. Is I need to be seen. I need to be heard and felt because, I mean, everyone does. Like you always say, everybody deserves to be seen. And so I believe that wholeheartedly. I don't know if I ever really fully believed that about myself until recently. So, yeah, I do have fears around letting people see who I am though, because, you know, when you're in these cutthroat environments, people use that against you. And I'm just at a point in my life where I'm okay with letting those people, when I know manipulation is taking place, calling it out. And if that means that I lose that person, so be it. Because if you keep them, you lose yourself, and that's worse. If your wildest dreams had already come true, what would your future self tell you to stop holding back? Wildest dreams. So first, I gotta figure out what are my wildest dreams. I think my wildest dreams are like to do what I'm doing and have the support built around me to be able to be fully present whenever I need to be with people who need me, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's my kids, sometimes it's my wife, sometimes it's my mom or my grandma or whatever it is. Like, that's my wildest dream. It's not to sell a painting for more money than anybody's ever sold a painting for. It's none of that. Like, those are dreams that I've had before. That's why it came to my mind right now. It's not my dream anymore. So, what would your future self tell you in order to get that dream that I have now to come to life, and what would I stop holding back? It would be this. It would be stop holding back my story and stop holding back the struggles and stop holding back on this image that, you know, marriage is perfect or, you know, business, owning a business is great. Like, it's struggle. And so I think that's just be real would be the advice that my future self would give me. Any final thoughts? I think that, like, if more people were to just say, I'm just going to start this thing, like what you're doing right here, it would create so much opportunity for others that, you know, I seen it firsthand with, you know, athletic aesthetic. I guess that's something we could talk about that I haven't even mentioned is, like, out of all of the things that I formed, athletic aesthetic is probably one of the most proud things that I've started. A lot of people don't even know about it. So Athletic Aesthetic is my podcast, and it's a brand now. And one of my big goals for the next year is to bring the show back, but do it in a more structured format. And so the way that it launched the first time, I mean, the first episode, I was in my basement, I had an iPhone, and I just talked about, I kind of did something similar to this, like, hi, I'm Vinnie, this is what I do. But it was so, like, surface level that it's like, I look back on it and I'm like, what am I even talking about? But then, you know, I started reaching out to some artist friends, and I had a studio in Market Square for like 2 years with this artist named Cody Sable. He's like a speed painter. And I started meeting a lot of people through having that space. And I was like, well, if I can figure out a podcast, like, I can probably figure out like some cool content here to promote the business and the art and all that. And it worked. Like, it really, like, I invested everything I had into it. Resource-wise, time, energy, everything. Like, everything went into the production. Everything went into any money that I brought in. I went right back into it, and it worked. Like, I got, by episode 5, I had a Steeler on the show. You know, I just recently got to do an episode with a few of my heroes growing up. So, like, you know, from Pitt football, like, I interviewed Walt Harris, which grew up watching Larry Fitzgerald and all these guys at Pitt play football, so him being the head coach. But I never knew what I was doing the show for other than to market my business. Now I realize, like, as I'm doing this, it's just opening up so many more opportunities for me. And then the brand is strong itself. Like, you know, my co-host on the show, Trey, I brought him into the mix in 2023. I met him end of 2022. So I was like coming up on a year of doing the show on my own. He actually worked at the media company where I ended up working. When he reached out, it wasn't a media company. It was a paving company. Okay. And he was brought there to be like a brand ambassador, kind of like grow the network of the company, because super successful financially, no brand awareness in the city. And they're a national company, so it was like they wanted to anchor their roots to Pittsburgh. Well, Trey hit me up. I brought my podcast there. We built a studio, and we did it at such a high level that we had partnerships with the Steelers, the Penguins, the Panthers. We were doing all this content for it all happened in that studio. And I met and rubbed shoulders with people, but I also brought people to the table that weren't there before. And then I started to see the value of that. I started to see like what that can do for a business that has a system in place to be able to actually plug that influence in and do something with it. But it wasn't my business. So you can only call the shots so far as you need to, and you know, you eventually have to either trust your vision or be part of one that's big enough that your vision can fit within it. And I felt like my vision kind of outgrew what I was doing there. And so, you know, I wish nothing but the best for them, but I had to make the jump in March to do, you know, VC2 full time. And it was the most difficult decision that I had ever made as a husband, you know, as a father that's a provider. Like my wife's a stay-at-home mom. She's the best at homeschooling and taking care of the kids, and she wanted to do that. And so I've figured out a way to make that possible now for her for 6 years. And I take a lot of pride in that, but at the same time, like, I couldn't do what I'm doing if it wasn't for her, you know, raising our kids at home and making sure they have like right now, you know, like I'm able to step out and do this because she's at home homeschooling my daughter. So there's so many things that I was starting to miss out on in that job, where I was leaving at 5 a.m. I was coming home at, you know, 7, 8 p.m. or maybe there was not, some nights I was there till midnight or even later. It was an hour away from my house. So many things that just, I knew it was time for me to take that jump, and I did it and left all security, all things I had been building, and I didn't even, the hard part for me was like leaving what I had built, because the natural response for me, like my ego, my all of that wanted to just be like, all right, we're all going now, you know, forget this place. And I didn't want to do that because I don't like burning bridges, because you never, especially in a small city, you never know when you're going to be the person on the other side that needs that support and that help. You know, and you pull the plug on something and remove yourself and try to set it up for the best success that it can have, and you just basically forfeit the narrative from there too, because, you know, it's been weird to watch something you built flourish, but at the same time know that same reason I'm here trying to be a little more vulnerable is because I know that the highlights that I see are not always accurate. So I'm grateful for all the lessons and the things that I learned there, the relationships I made, but Athletic Aesthetic is mine, and it's the reason that I went there to begin with. And I've been letting it sleep for about a year, but I have a goal for this year to turn it into an actual athletic apparel brand and do that through the podcast. Yeah, I have a lot of really big goals this year, but it's going to require more than just myself. And, you know, as somebody who took the leap and has a family and all these things, like, I need people to jump in and, like, be a part of it. And it's finding those right people, because, you know, the sky's the limit for how big we can build it. It's just a matter of, like, getting there, you know, and making sure people feel appreciated along that journey and that their vision can fit inside that as well. Any final thoughts I have would be, I would just say for anybody that is watching, this is how it should be done. Not what I'm saying, but how you're structuring this. It allows people to speak to things that matter to them. You do research. You obviously care. And I think that if there's people watching this kind of content and they have connections in the city and they haven't reached out to you to say, hey, how can we help with what you're doing? They should do that. Those are my final thoughts, because I like doing this kind of stuff. And I wish I could do this every single day. I wish I could meet up with other creatives. There's 100 people in my texts right now that we could do something like this, but there's no resources. So, obviously you've set it up for yourself to be able to do this, but like, this is not easy to pull off. There's a lot of long nights of editing, and I'm sure, but I think Pittsburgh in general is starting to shift into resourcing and equipping creatives a little bit more to do this type of work. And so if you're on either end of that aspect, like if you're a business that's looking to market themselves, like, these are creative ways to do that. They should reach out to you. If you're an artist who's looking to figure out how to turn their art into something, a career, a passion, or maybe not, maybe just talk about what they do, they should also reach out to you. So I see you have like a bunch of forms and things like that on your site, but I would just say my final thoughts are that, I'm grateful to be able to tell my story. I'm grateful to get to sit down and do this in a cool space, and I hope to watch this blossom and grow.